Welcome. This is another, I believe, important video for Grasshopper and beginners. One of the most critical thing to do is to get lost in it. And it's good advice I received probably well, maybe not the best time in my life, but I think it was when I was starting school when I was 18. And that's what I did during Frost Week at the University of Waterloo in math and computers. I got lost, that's for sure, physically and conceptually and psychically. Anyway, yada yada yada. I'd like to go in and finish the params, get into input, and in input you're going to find the most common node. I don't even think I brought it up. Well, I'm not specifically bringing it up. It is I'm going to turn off this turning device just to take a look at what I've made. I've made several iterations of this, and we're going to keep taking a look at a few examples of it. There's a curve kicking off here in the background. I'm not sure what I have that for. It might be necessary, so let's just put it on hidden. Anyway, here's a shape, and you're like, well, what's that? Why'd you make it? What's it for? Well, I think those are two of the most foolish questions in the world. What is it? What is it for? Especially for the visual artist. I don't bother myself with really those questions. Not when I'm trying to, when I am lost in something. Anyway, it's number sliders that we're looking at. One of the most common inputs. You're going to be bringing it in like crazy. So here it is. It's a basic number slider. I never bring it in this way because it gives me a 0 to 10 at a 3 decimal places. Now, if I wanted that, I would double click and I would type in 0 less than 0.250 less than 10. And you can put in 10. Doesn't matter what decimals you put in at this point because they're already in there. And if you hit enter, you're going to be set at that number slider, which will do the same thing. That's it. I'm not sure why it comes out a little bigger. And actually, I lied. I put it in with the decimal place shift. They actually was dealing with 0 to 1. Anyway, I showed you a different technique. The most important thing about the number sliders are getting used to them. You can spend all day on them, going into the edit, checking out the rational numbers, just the integer number system, even numbers, odd numbers, decimals, name them, give them special qualities. You can move what points you want along that curve as you go. You can set the count high or low by rolling. You can turn it negative. Of course, if it's 0, it's not going to go negative. You can go -3 to 31. You can have a range. You can move it in here. There's so many things to do, let alone right-clicking on it and deciding to animate these things, add expressions to them, having snaps in them. You type in, you say, okay, well, I want that to snap at 0.5. Okay, there's so much within these number sliders. It's not enough said about them. But if I had to bring them in, I would bring them in many different ways. This one, if it's a range, that was drawn off the shelf, and it came in at 0.250 and it's set between 0 and 1. Now, if I type in 1, double-click and type in the integer 1, it's going to go from 0 to 1. It's a nice way to get a Boolean. If you type in anything between, let me delete that, anything between 0.45, that's going to go from 0 to 1, but it's going to have 2 decimal places, depending on how many decimal places you put in. 2, if you type in, will be integers between 0 and 10, and 2.00 will be rational numbers between 0 and 10. 12 will be integers between 0 and 100, and 12.00 will be rational numbers between 0, and it continues like that. So if you want to go between 0 and 1,000, then type in 123. If you want 123.1, you're going to have numbers with 1 decimal place. So there's the number slider. And I don't mean to make this as boring as it sounds. This Boolean toggle I never did put into place, but what I'm going to suggest you do is quite literally get lost. And the two tools that you should be looking at are the first two that are listed here, and then the first two here, number sliders and panels. Panels tell you stuff. So I'm going to make this bigger. I don't know how much bigger I want to make it because I want to see the object. Basically, I pull out some shape. I pull out a number slider. I said somewhere between that number slider and that panel, I'm going to do something. So then I copied it down here. I said, well, let's just hammer through params all the way through to transformations, and stop short on intersections and meshes and surfaces, transformations. There's enough to do. And I pull up a thing called an MD slider, a multidimensional slider. I pull up a gene pool, which has its own edits, which behaves somewhat like if you click it here, if you right click it, you can hit randomize and boom, it works like a multiple number slider. Really cool tool. I use it quite a bit. And then I pulled up a graph mapper that you can go in and you can just click different graphs and change things out. There's a parabola graph and you can have full effect on those. If you double click on them, you can set the ranges much higher than they were. You can affect them on the change of the X and Y. Once again, tons of stuff you can do in here. So I did that and I'm like, well, okay, that works. That little Bezier graph works between there, and my data changes as I move my graph around. So my number changes. Isn't that interesting? How does that work? And now we're starting to get lost. We go further in and we're like, well, I want to activate all these things. I like these ideas of domains and divide domain 2, things that are greater than things that are equal. There's even a Python node, and there's an equation node that I can jump into and all of a sudden have all these effects. And now you're getting lost, and you're going to be like, mostly why students of mine and people I know just put down Grasshopper. But I don't do that. I jump in there. I have my number sliders. I'm going to start activating them. And as we go through here, you'll see I didn't activate the Boolean toggle. I kind of regret that. I don't think there's a place for it, but maybe there is. We'll just drag this along as we go through the script. I've got a bunch of number sliders here that aren't being activated, but here are a few that are. This one, this one, this one, and this one. Well, what happens to that geometry when I start to move it? Oh my gosh, I have a lot of control over what this object might actually become. And so I've got that operating. I don't know what this 9 does. Well, it jitters and does all these wonderful patterns for this kind of canopy building. Once again, staying symmetrical is fairly easy. It's getting things asymmetrical, which is fun. Here's a value to raise it up in the air and drop it back down to the ground plane. And I put it down too far, it seems to disappear. So there's kind of a things happening that your scripts are kind of failing. And I've got this really cool, I don't know, let's say something that would come on an album cover when I was a little younger, but anyway, something like, I don't know, Yes, or something like that. Anyway, keep playing, keep sliding along. You made a domain, you made a range. I slid it into a sine cosine because I know that's trigonometry. I can multiply it, and that's what I was doing. I was amplifying. I was amplifying a sine curve. Same way down here, I was amplifying and multiplying a graph mapper set to, I think, Bezier that can be changed to affect the geometry. Actually, I'm not sure which one I have it set at. Well, either way, I don't know what I have now. I better just leave it the way it was. I'm going to take this off so I can get at it and move it around. I don't see it affecting my geometry too much. What is the effects of that as opposed to the other one? Maybe it's the multiplication that really matters. Maybe I haven't reparameterized. Maybe that's really the effect of moving that. Anyway, I've got it active, and I've turned it into something. I've pulled some points out of here. If we go on here, I've pulled these 2 points out of here. Why have I done that? I've tested whether one bit of data coming out here is the second number is greater or less than that number. Depending on which one it is it larger than or equal to? It sends me out a called pattern because I checked this and I was like, hey, that gives me true false values. That's a good pattern to put into as a Boolean into this list items. And the list item is like, it's going to give me true, false, true on those 3 points. I'm then going to construct a plane out of those points. And there's only 2 planes. It's really not that complex a script, but believe me, it can get a lot more complex if you start pushing these numbers up. I'm going to keep it pretty simple to start. Actually, if I take this one up to 4, well, you'll see how it complicates the geometry of what we have. In fact, I think I changed it already, and I might be having a problem with it. There, it took a little while to load. You see what I did? I just blasted that form into multiple kind of rippled areas. And I don't know why you'd make something like this, but I am, now I'm getting a little sci-fi and spacey and stuff like that. But it's so simple to get lost in forms and kind of lose control. And what I did here was I set a cherry picker, and I preset X extends that worked when I moved this. It might not work anymore. If I set it to 2, does it work? It does work. And if I set it to 1, basically it's choosing 1, so it's choosing 8 count right now. It's choosing 8, so it's putting in the information 8. 0 is actually putting in 5, and I actually like that one. I don't know what's going on, but I've got this strange kind of canopy that spreads out, and I can take that up to obviously the 4 count, and actually I've got 5 count here, which might roll around. So anyhow, I did a square. I just made I made it a panel that can have multiple sides. X extends, so you can see what happens as I move those. I'm getting less squares in each one of those. It takes a second to register. At least it should take a second to register. There we go. Then I've got some points, and I said, well, whenever I get points, and whenever I have points, I love to deconstruct them, look at the attributes. And I just took it apart, put them back together as points, and I didn't even think about that. Like I just plugged them in wherever. I took the min and max and I plugged them in, and then I did a holistic join, which got me back into some symmetry. And that's where you see these points having effect on the geometry. And at that point I said, well, I'll just build a surface out of one side and the other side. That's exactly what I did. I have the one side, and I was like, okay, that's working for me. I guess I'll just do the other side. And I did that from the other points, and I didn't have to worry about grafting or playing with the data or getting lost in it. It's not too hard for me to think about what's happening. But both sides actually have a U count that works at 9. And you'll see you bust your script when you don't have the right UV counts. And I usually just tend to slide around until things work and fail. But that 9 count, if that really works on that count, I can always internalize and just bury it in there. We're already at 10 minutes. And that way it's in my script. I don't need any of that. I won't need this number slider anymore. Then over here, I've got some really crazy stuff. I've got this surface edit point, and on it, I put these kind of blasted apart bells. And you're like, well, they don't look like bells anymore. Well, they certainly don't. And I might have to go farther down my script to show you what was going on with those. They're actually these bells that I've blown apart in different areas and treated the surface differently. But what I did was I went in there and I said, okay, let's have some control over those on a UV slider that goes all over the surface of this thing. And right now I'm having trouble moving this point out from the side. It's only holding to that side, so I must have changed the data a little bit that I'm not able to evaluate those surfaces anymore on my multidimensional slide. There we go. Now it's moving. You see those bells rolling all over both surfaces. And they're not oriented in the same way because of the normals and the XY to each plane on both sides, but they do give me a little difference as I move them around. And I'm just doing a kind of, I don't know if I think of them as tail end stuff flying off or whatever, but I can position those any way I want. And I actually went in and did a variable pipe on those, so I can affect the shape of those very easily, of those bells, by either moving out my range, and actually I think it only works on the 5. It has to work on 5 because I have 5. If you have 5 items coming in your parameters, and you have to go from 0 to 1 because basically they're on lines, they're on this curve, which is hard for me to see. It's the normal coming out of wherever I am positioning that on the surface. I'm getting a normal point, so that line then becomes, that was kind of cool. I don't know, I'm getting lost and I'm running out of time. We're at 12.5 minutes. But this is how I want some people to kind of think about learning Grasshopper, and your own geometry is getting lost within it. So here, if I go in here and I start playing off of these surfaces, I can blow up the bells, I can ring them out, do some really interesting kind of disconnected forms. That one's not doing much, but if I bring the bezier down, I think it thins it. There should be another control over here that I can thicken it like that. So you're getting these strange discs that are coming out, and then if I continue to that pipe, I decided, well, instead of it as 1, I'll put it into segments, and I kind of cut the bell shapes into 8 pieces each. So I had actually 18 trim surfaces each. I must have changed my numbers, and there's my list length. I put it through another range, and I multiplied it so I could put it in a jitter node and move it in all these different directions to the normal of what was there. So as I bring it down to 0, they kind of stay into the shape that I made them as discs. But as I have them affected by the normal, I blast them up. 13.5 minutes, I basically made these rings that respond to that surface, and that surface is, it's just, it's what it is. And if I go into here and I do a kind of view extends all, I don't know, it's kind of a cool thing. I definitely would not have made it in Rhino. I don't think anybody else has ever made this shape. I don't know if anybody else ever would. There's no point in stealing my scripts when I'm playing this way. But once again, I have really nice parametric control over all these different shapes. And to me, this is modeling. This is working in wax. This is plastering. This is steel. This is building another structure on my land. I'm sorry I didn't get to affect the Boolean Toggle, which is just on and off. And actually in PARAM, you can have other things like inputs, buttons that you actually hold down and it's activated. So that's very similar to that. Needless to say, I think it's a pretty cool script. It's playful. And we're running out of time, and I say thank you for watching. I'm going to put it into this next script, see if anybody watches it online. And I know I enjoyed it, and because I did, I'm going to make it a beautiful color blue. And I think we're done. That's it. Thanks for watching.